Ah,
Hello, you're through to Books Boys. You've got Dean on the line. Who's calling? Go ahead.
go ahead.
Yep, just introduce yourself.
My name is Gary Stuart.
Gary, it's a great coincidence that you would call in because we were just chatting about your book. In fact, your two books, the Twin Murders books that I was just chatting to my co-host about them. So thank you very much for sending those. I absolutely love them. How are you today?
Just great. It's nice to be in New Mexico.
I'm guessing you're getting a little bit better weather than we're getting here in the UK.
Yeah, it is 43 degrees out there right now. No wind.
43, yeah. I don't know that in Celsius, but I think it's a good bit better than what we've got. It's pretty cold here today. But look, I want to talk to you about your books. So a lot of the time we interview first time authors, first or second book, but you're quite a prolific writer. You've had a lot of books before. How long have you been writing for?
Since I was about five,
Wow, okay, that's a good long time. What did you write when you were five?
I wrote two cartoons, and a poem, and a note to my little sister. I'm just making that up. I'm 84 today, so I don't remember much about being five.
But did the question is still true though, when you were little, you did like to write, yeah?
I don't think so. I like
No.
to write. Yeah. When I joined the Air Force in the mid 50s, my full time job for 4 years in the Air Force was writing. That's what I
Okay.
did all day long, every day. So that's how I
So
started
that's how you
writing.
started. And
Yeah.
then you've been writing now, presumably for a while. So how many books have you actually had published?
I've had 18 published, and the new books, uh, Hyde and Bee, and my brother, myself, that will make it 20. I've got another new book that I'll release next summer, in the summer of 2024.
Wow, okay. So you're writing very prolifically. 18, that's a lot, and not including the two that I've just read. And I like to ask people, what's the plan? Are you working on a new book? And you're so far ahead of me. You've got the next one ready to go next summer already.
Yes, I have to be ahead.
And what's happening in the next book? Is it related to these, or is it just something new?
It is related to these two books. Right now, the book is a duology.
Mm-hmm.
There are two books. They're closely related. Uh, and the third book, the one that will come out next summer, is book three in this series.
Okay. So I read the two thinking this was going to be a complete story, but no, it is going to be a trilogy. Is three going to be the end, or are we going to keep going?
It depends on how well books one, two, and three do. If they do
Okay,
well,
yeah.
there'll be a book
The,
four.
the realistic answer, I suppose, yeah. So let's talk about what happens. We have two twins, Marty and Artie, Martin and Arthur, and they have this game hide and be where they'll replace each other in certain scenarios. You hide and I'll be the person right now. So one of them gets in trouble, you'll take the blame for it. I'll hide this kind of thing. And it seems that later, as they go into adult life, they continue to do that to an extent. And then after the death of one twin, the other is actually so Arthur is actually still using almost as a coping mechanism this hide and be game. And I suppose some of the questions we need to figure out throughout the two books, you know, are does he understand who he is? Does he know that he's Arthur? Is he projecting kind of Martin's personality onto him? Is it a delusion, or is it something that he's doing deliberately to avoid punishment? And of course, the two books explore those themes. Then, is that a fair summary?
That's one of the best summaries I've heard
Okay, well,
about this book. So I'm very happy that you've gotten that far.
good, good. So let me ask you, when people talk to you about the two, which of the two books is their favorite?
Well, clearly, book number one is my favorite
Mm,
because that took me 12 years to develop book one.
right, wow.
I went through a half a dozen full rewrites to
Mm-hmm.
finish book one. I finished book two in less than 6 months.
Okay, wow. So
So
that's a massive difference in time scale there.
it is.
So book one was more of a, I don't want to say a labor of love, but it was that one that you put so much of yourself into, so much of your time. Book two was the, let's do a sequel.
Yes. Prequel and sequel.
Yeah. And you know, it's fantastic because I think they certainly both read excellently. Um, we've got Dr. Lisbeth Socorro as our, well, basically she's working in book one in the prison as a medical attendant in the prison, and she's trying to evaluate Arthur. By book two, she's actually then attached to assist the FBI on an investigation. And she quite quickly realizes that it's the same guy. Um, Now, what made you want to write this story? You know, where did the idea come from for this twin murders idea story?
That requires a little bit of explanation.
All right.
I'm, I'm what they call a pantster. I write books by the seat of my pants. I do not outline them.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have a form that I follow. I don't have the foggiest idea of what is about to happen in my book. I didn't know, for example, that when they're in their mid 20s, Arthur and Martin separate by death. One
Mm-hmm.
of them dies. I didn't know that. I
Right.
knew it. I knew it when the scene came up on my computer. I saw it and was surprised. How am I going to write a book about twins when one of the twins is dead? What's going to happen next?
Yeah.
So I've written all of my fiction titles under this theory that you cannot get ahead of your reader. And the way you get ahead of your reader, too far ahead of your reader, is if you've got a complicated outline
Yeah.
and the reader figures you out. And he or she starts to think about what's going to happen next, just like you thought about, in this case, it's me, what I thought about when I came to this death. What am I going to do now? What's the survivor going to do? What motivates him to do what he actually turned out doing? So, as you know from reading the first book, this death occurs as an accident on a river. I know the river. I've been on that river in a boat in a storm. So I can describe that from my own memory. I cannot
Yeah.
describe how the accident occurs. All of that is done by the seat of my pants.
Mm-hmm.
But once I've got that far and one of these two boys dies, what does the other one do when he finally gets the body in the boat and he goes upriver, gets back to their little camp? What does he do at that point? I haven't the foggiest idea because I don't outline. I try to write the book as it happens.
Mm-hmm.
In this particular book, for whatever reason, I thought that Arthur gets the body of his twin, Martin. He pulls the body into the camp inside the building and he starts digging up the floorboards and he buries his brother's body underneath the floorboard. Now what?
Now what? Yeah.
Again, I don't have the foggiest idea where this book is going
So
to
you're just
go.
as surprised as we are with the
I am.
developments.
I am. And as long as I'm surprised, you can't guess what's going to happen next. If you could,
Yeah.
it would take the tension out of the book. That's what Stephen Hawking sells. He
Hmm.
says, never write a book where the reader can get ahead of you. And the only way the reader gets ahead of you is he figures you out. You've got an outline and you're following it.
Yeah.
If you don't do that, so once the body is under the floorboards, I have to figure out, and as I type, as I look at my computer screen, I have to figure it out. I can't look away and start making notes. That doesn't happen. I'll lose the flow of the story if that happens.
Yeah.
So what I do in this particular case, what I did was decide that what Arthur needs to do is to go back to town where his brother's girlfriend is waiting for him. So he decides to become his brother.
Hmm.
For him, it's natural. He's been doing that his whole life.
Yeah. It's
Whenever his brother got in trouble, he took the blame for it. Now, the reader already knows that because that's a prior scene. So it will feel fairly natural for the reader to believe that this guy has got the chutzpah to go ahead and go into his brother's apartment and say, hey, love, I'm home. Give her a hug. And the hug turns out to more. How can he do that? How can he have sex with his brother's girlfriend? Isn't that rape?
well, yeah, that's one of the difficult themes that the book
Yeah,
covers, and he
yeah, it
doesn't
is.
think of it as rape.
No, he doesn't. And so, as an author, I'm thinking, what the hell's he thinking about? Why is he doing this?
Yeah.
But I'm in the story and I'm in charge of the story. I just don't know where it's going. So I keep
Hmm.
on going. And if you read the rest of book one, you'll see that he's still doing what he's been doing all his life. He's pretending to be somebody that he's not. It's hide and be all over again.
Yeah.
And
And he
as the book
has,
flows,
in the end, he has the two girls, Rosie and Marcella, like his own girl and his brother's girl, both trying to juggle them at one point.
yes, and Marcella in San Diego, that's Arthur's girlfriend, she keeps saying, well, when am I going to get to meet your twin brother? You've told me so much about him. And this girl, what did you tell me her name was? Rosie? Rosie. I'd like to meet Rosie. Why don't we go to Maine and meet your brother and his girlfriend? Well, now he's in trouble
Hmm.
because he's got to have an answer for that. And I'm the author. I don't have an answer for that. So what I do is I just wait it out. I keep typing. I
Hmm.
keep creating as I'm going because it's coming to me. Well, maybe what he's going to do here is string her out a little bit, and he does. Uh, but he feels a stronger obligation to Rosie back in Maine than he does to Marcella down there in San Diego. That's 3,000 miles away. And he has to find ways to make this pretense, this pretending, this hiding and being his brother, he has to make it work in both cities. And as a writer, when I get to that point, then I'm starting to think about crimes and other mischief. I
Yeah.
spent my life in courtrooms. I'm a retired lawyer.
Hmm.
I've tried cases like this one over the years. So I use some of those skills to make this story realistic, to make it credible. It's utter bullshit. I'm making it up as I go, fast as I can. But I've got to convince my reader that this story is plausible.
Yeah.
Not real, but it has to be plausible. I can't make him fly to the moon. This is not science fiction, but I can make him do things that a man so troubled, so wounded as a young child, and then the biggest wound of all, he loses his brother. And for a long time, he thinks he killed his brother. He was driving the boat. He hit the big rock in the middle of the storm. He shouldn't have done that. He should have been able to get around that rock. He feels guilt. He starts to hate himself and love his brother even more. How would you do that if you loved your brother more than you did yourself? Hey, why don't you become your brother? Be your brother,
Yeah.
but not in San Diego. In San Diego, he's himself.
And he lives a dual life then for a
Yeah.
while. Yeah.
And I can remember as an author when this quagmire, this terrible reality becomes clear, and I'm saying to myself, how am I going to get out of this?
You're trapped.
So I'm playing the role of Arthur as I write about Arthur when he's in San Diego with his other girlfriend. Now he has two, one in Maine who thinks he's Martin, and one in San Diego who thinks he's Arthur. How does he get out of this? That's when he figures out that, well, these are reasonably well-educated young boys. We have the same DNA. It's identical.
Yeah.
No one can tell us apart from a DNA perspective. So if Arthur dies in San Diego, maybe the brother's DNA from Maine can be brought here. And so he does. He brings his brother's body to California, down into Mexico, sets the fire. The body burns up, but enough of it stays. And so the cops and everybody else is all convinced that Arthur died in Mexico. He
Yeah.
can now go back to Maine and be Martin safely because Arthur is dead. Except, of course, that Arthur isn't dead.
Yeah.
So writing this book was an enormous lot of fun.
I would say so. Yeah. You've got a bit
Yeah.
of it's a darker version of the comedy of errors, you know. You've got the two kind of twins, and this is what can happen in that circumstance in the darkest possible way.
Yeah.
Let me ask you
Yeah.
something. Does he, is this a clever guy saying, okay, I can get away with things and pretend to be my twin? Or is this, a vulnerable, hurt person whose twin has died? He hasn't had the easiest upbringing. And, this is his coping mechanism, and he's genuinely deluded in these moments. Because it's very convenient to say, in the second book, for example, when other murders are happening and he's suspected of them, it's very convenient to keep saying, oh, you got the wrong guy. I'm Martin. Now I'm Arthur. Is this a deliberate thing, or do we believe him?
You're absolutely making my day today. You're doing exactly what I hoped the reader would do.
Good.
As the reader turns the pages, he's starting to think, well, what is this guy? Is he just clever? Or is he a mean, bad person? Because he's blaming things now on Martin back there and taking advantage of being Arthur out here. And the reader has to be wondering, I'm thinking as I'm writing, the reader has to be wondering, well, what is his real motive here? Is it to continue to live like his brother because it's fun? Or is it a deeper responsibility? Does he really owe this? And so is he traumatized, or is he just having the time of his life?
And we find ourselves doing the work of Dr. Socorro to an extent and trying to do the evaluation and figure this guy out.
Well, Dr. Socorro is the saving grace in this book, because I got to a point in book one where I couldn't really think about where I'm going to go as a writer. but I've represented a lot of doctors and a lot of psychiatrists in Arizona over my life as a lawyer. So I created a psychiatrist and put her in the book as the person who's going to solve the problem, the legal problem for the court system.
Mm-hmm.
Because now she's got a judge that's really ticked off. He's appointed her to figure out whether Arthur is telling the truth, he is Arthur Cheshire, or is he lying to everybody and he's actually Martin Cheshire. Her job is to figure that out. So she takes that role on without ever done anything like this in her life before. That's because I don't think anybody else has ever invented this ridiculous reality before.
I imagine not.
And so she becomes a much more leading character, a stronger character. So she's stronger than the lawyers, she's stronger than the judge, she's stronger than the jailers, and she's much smarter than Arthur.
Yeah.
And so the dialogue between the psychiatrist and the prisoner becomes more of a dialogue, more of an interchange of ideas, and she starts convincing him that he needs to come out from under the covers and tell me the truth. And he eventually does, but he's doing it reluctantly because he's still trying to protect his brother, who's dead. And no one knows his brother's dead because they haven't told anybody about the death, the accident, the voting accident.
Mm-hmm.
So the more I write, the more complicated this book gets. And from my perspective, I'm happy as a pig. I love complication.
Yeah.
I love unknowing. The fact that the judge has to say to the prosecutor in the case, this is a federal criminal case, he says to the prosecutor, "Who are you prosecuting?" And he says, "Well, we're prosecuting Arthur Cheshire." Well, point to him. Well, where is he? Is he in the courtroom? So the prosecutor points to him and said, "Yes, he's the defendant. His name is Arthur Cheshire." And then he turns to the defense lawyer and he says to the defense lawyer, "Who's your client?" "My client is Arthur Cheshire." "Well, is he here in court?" "Yes, he is. He's sitting right here." "Well, that can't be because the charging documents are against Martin Cheshire, not Arthur Cheshire." So it creates a gigantic problem for the judge. And the judge says to both lawyers, "Look, I'm not taking one more time in the courtroom here. You guys go away and you figure out who you're representing and who you're representing, and it can't be the same guy.
Yeah, it can be the same guy.
You got to figure out." Now, I've been in those kinds of courtroom situations where the two lawyers are so far apart that the judge has to bring us together by identifying a single problem. Who do you represent? It's not the same guy. Don't come back in here and tell me it's the same
It's the
guy.
same guy. I think I have more sympathy for him in the first book than in the second book when other murders start happening. Then there's that little turn towards, okay, maybe he is a bad guy, but
Yeah.
we still don't know what's going on in his mind and we still don't know how it's all justified. But I don't want to kind of give too many spoilers either. Why don't you tell us where we can get the book if you want to plug your website or anything like that?
Absolutely, sure. You can get it on Amazon.com. In this country, I don't know how do they have bookstores in England?
Yeah, of course.
Go to a store
Of course.
book?
Bookstores are
Well,
some of my favorite places.
well, there are not very many bookstores left in America.
Oh.
The reality is that the seller of all books is Amazon.
It's Amazon. Yeah, it's probably still the biggest one here too now.
My books, both of these two books, are up on Amazon. They're ready for sale. They're in the pre-sale mode right now. You can order it. It's not going to be delivered till February 6th. That's not my idea. That's the idea of a really good publicist. She said, "Let's wait until February. Let's see if we can get some interest in your book. maybe we could get the Books Boys in England. Maybe they'd be interested. So
we were indeed.
That's how you got here. But my sense is that as this book comes out, as more reviewers get a chance to read it, as more people like you who not only read it, but wondered about it, and did me the great favor of letting me talk to you on your podcast.
Oh, it's absolutely our pleasure. And we have one trick question before I let you go. We ask all the authors that call in, and before we let them go, if there's one existing book that you wish you had been the person to write, what would it be?
Well, my favorite author is Irving Stone. And he wrote a number of books, all about famous people. His titles are all nonfiction books.
Okay.
And so Adversary in the House is his book that I enjoyed the most. In fiction, there's so many good fiction writers today that I read that I really don't have a favorite. I like John Grisham.
I was going to ask your opinion on John Grisham, probably the most best known legal, with you having a legal background as well, legal writer.
Well, the reason I like John Grisham's fiction is because he was not just a lawyer, but a damn good lawyer. And he tried some important cases, and I can see it in his writing. He wasn't your average run-of-the-mill lawyer. He was sought after. He didn't do it as long as I did. I was a full-time lawyer next week. I'm resigning my license, turning it over to the bar. I'm retiring next week.
Wow.
So that's 56 years for me. He didn't last that long.
56 years. I think you've served your time admirably.
When he writes stories that have legal subjects, and many of them, in fact, probably most of them do, all of this shows up. So it's the same thing in my book. Whether I'm writing a fiction story like these, or a legal story, or some other nonfiction story, I've got lawyers and judges and courtrooms and witnesses. Because that was such a big world for me. But in 1994, I wrote my first book. It was a legal textbook. It's actually available today, but I advise everybody don't buy this thing. It is wrong at every level. All the rules have changed so much, so I tell people not to buy it. But Grisham has created an industry out of placing his books in legal settings, and some of these characters are either lawyers or defendants or victims, and he makes that all work. So I've read, I think, everything he's ever written, and I don't really have a particular favorite because I keep changing. So my favorite is whatever his last book
whatever
is.
The newest one is, yeah. Cool. Well, Gary, thank you so much for calling into the show. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you very much. I enjoyed it today.